I'm John.
We're the Debt-Free Guys, and this is another episode of our Money Masters Blab series. We are so excited to introduce the February Money Master. If you're not familiar with our Money Master series, once a month we have an individual who is either a personal finance expert or an expert in an industry. We invite them to our website to a text interview, and then that is usually done the first week of the month. And then the third week of the month, we invite them onto Blab, and we ask them a couple of questions. And if you feel like you want to ask a couple of questions, remember to use the /Q, and you can go ahead and ask some questions. And our first question here for our guest, Amanda Abella. If you're not familiar, Amanda Abella is a personal finance expert. We're just going to go ahead and have Amanda introduce herself and tell us a little bit about herself and what she's doing.
So, hi, everyone. Thank you. Thanks for having me. My name's Amanda Abella. I'm the Amazon best-selling author of Make Money Your Honey. You can go find that on Amazon. I'm a personal finance blogger. I specialize in millennials. I write for a bunch of other websites. I also do business and money mindset coaching and blog coaching. And basically, my whole mission in life is to just help millennials have better relationships with their finances and then also with their work, because for most people, especially when you're in your 20s and you're just starting out, work is how you make money. Right. Yeah, so I'm really interested in the intersection of the two and just starting to have a much better relationship with both of those areas in our lives that are so intricately linked, especially because this generation, in 2010, I graduated, couldn't find a job for 6 months, was underemployed. We've got student loan debt that's out of control. Like, there's certain challenges that this generation has had that has really changed kind of the way they think about money and work in general. And I basically speak to that.
Nice. Very cool.
Very cool. Well, we're very excited to have you. We have some questions for you, so let's just go ahead and jump right in.
Cool.
Right.
And I started interviewing people, with the intention of, I'm going to create this group coaching program for my market. And after, I don't know, I must have done like 100 interviews between like blog readers, clients, colleagues, friends, people that I knew. I must have done about 100. I'm not even joking. And at the end of it, when I was looking at all these notes, I was like, oh my God, there's a book here.
Yes.
There's like, this is a draft. Like this is not coaching. This is a book.
Right.
And 3 months later, I put it together. I formatted it, did everything myself except for the editing, and launched it on Amazon. Did my own little virtual book tour that I put together, and it was a bestseller in 2 categories. And my business and life have never been the same since.
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
That's amazing.
Really cool.
Yeah,
that's a lot of work too. We know what it's like to write a book.
Yeah,
it's not easy. So nice job. Especially we did ours in like 8 years. So that you did it in 3 months or maybe a little bit more is astounding.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just became increasingly clear. Like I'm very intuitive when it comes to business moves, especially the longer that I'm in it. And it just became very clear. Like there was a voice inside of my head that was like, you need to put this out there. This is what people need. Right. So I did. And like I said, nothing's been the same since.
That's cool.
Very cool.
Well, so in your answer there and your text interview for our Money Masters, you use a lot of verbiage that reminds me of the law of attraction philosophy, and we talk a lot about being money conscious.
Right.
So we wanted to ask you, what do you think about that philosophy and how it relates to money?
The law of attraction, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I oftentimes talk about this because I'm like 50% hippie. Actually, no, Michelle Jackson was like, you're so hippie fantastic when it comes to that. You really need that. And I've noticed that and the thing is that I originally started blogging and it was just personal development type stuff. And I did my life coaching certification. I'm telling you, I went everywhere from like 22 to 24. I was all over the place. And so I started bringing that into the conversation of money. And I started to notice there are like these two different camps, kind of, right? So it was like the typical personal finance, which is like, don't buy the latte, don't buy the latte, don't do it, right? And then right, that was like, I'm just gonna slap everything on a credit card and the universe is gonna bring it all back to me. And I'm like, right? So I started to notice this and I was like, okay, how can we like bring it together? Because you need both. You can't go, like if you go to either extreme, you're going to be miserable. Right. I mean, on this extreme over here, you might have money, but you're going to be miserable. And on this extreme over here, you're just going to be broke and eventually you're going to be miserable.
That's miserable.
Right.
Right. So that it was just a matter of like, how can we marry these two? And I'm really big on it, you know, because there's nothing wrong with setting intentions. There's nothing wrong with visualizing, but you also got to put in a lot of work. Like I hustle, you hustle, right? You know, it's just I hustle with a particular intention in mind.
Right. Exactly. Yes. It's interesting you say that because that's kind of our thought process behind the whole idea of being money conscious and why we encourage people to do that is that we understand that when you're money conscious, you're focusing on a few things, but then your subconscious focuses on so many more things. Your mind drifts in certain directions. And when that happens, that's when that intention really starts to drive what it is that your habits become, what it is that your daily actions dictate that really then makes your life that much better. That's where the improvement comes. You have this intention, but then everything that drifts from that, your subconscious mind telling you, you need to be doing this or you need to be doing that, or maybe you shouldn't be buying that latte today, you can have it on Friday. Those kinds of things, I think it really kind of helps draw it all back into this is your intention with your life is to do better. And it's almost like the analogy I use oftentimes about being money conscious, driving down the street and going through the intersection, not realizing whether it's green or red. Well, as soon as you start to focus on where you're going, you get there, but along the way, you're still picking up the signals that are coming from around you. So you see that there are kids walking down the road, so you slow down a little bit, or you realize that there's some construction or something like that, so you have to maybe move over one lane. You're still going in the right direction. You're still heading in the right direction. Your intention is still there, but subconsciously your mind is picking up on those things. And I think that's kind of where this whole idea of law of attraction, and like you said, so many people go to the far extremes with them, but they don't have to.
Yeah, and it doesn't work when you do. It's all a matter of bringing it together. And, you know, with some of my money mindset coaching clients, I mean, we just do a whole 3 months just on mindset because it just affects you so much, regardless of whether you're running a business or, you know, working full time for someone else. What you think, believe, and feel about money will affect the way you behave with money. Exactly. And if you're not clear about that, right, it's going to be very difficult for you to move forward. And I joke around all the time and I say, my God, how many editors am I gonna have who are telling me to write things like "Don't spend more than you earn"? I'm like, don't people get it by now? Don't spend more than you earn.
Right. What is sad is that there are people who still don't get it.
Right. And then I'm here like, oh, wait a second. Maybe if we went in deeper and we looked into why are you spending more than you earn? Why do you feel like you have to do this? You know, or another flip side of that is what do you want to use money for? Exactly. A lot of people don't know, you know, like what is your intention with money? How do you want to use it? Because at the end of the day, money is just a tool.
Right.
Exactly.
Well, I think very often intention is the ingredient that people are missing. And so they're working really hard and frustrated because they're not making enough money, or they're making a lot of money and they're just acquiring things, but they're still not happy. And they don't understand why they're not happy because they should, by all intents and purposes, be happy. Right. But it's the lack of intention, not knowing why they want the money or why they want certain things, that's usually missing in most people's lives.
And that was the key to us getting out of debt when we sat down and said, we wanted a life with intention. What do we want to be spending our money on? And it came down to, we wanted to be able to travel and we wanted to be able to have a comfortable retirement. And so we said, all the other things are out the door. They are not the primary thing that we focus on.
Yeah.
So we didn't feel compelled to buy a 3,500 square foot house, or both be driving cars that cost us $60,000 and sat in the parking lot at work and then in a garage at home.
Right.
And, we spend 45 minutes a day. And so there wasn't a reason for us to feel compelled to do those kinds of things, because the intention was we wanted to be able to travel. We'd rather have that margarita on the beach in Mexico than at the bar.
That'll be me into.
We haven't been to Miami in like 7 or 8 years, so I think we're doing a trip there.
Yeah.
A lot of people are coming here now. I've got people visiting like all over. I'm like, yeah, everyone just come. I'll show you around.
That's cool.
Great.
All of a sudden she'll be like, I have no money left. All my friends are visiting.
Yeah. So I have a question for you. You talked about how in 2010 you were kind of that stereotypical, I don't want to say lost, but wasn't certain millennial. What kind of advice would you give for someone who's at that point today? Either they are a young millennial or maybe a Gen Z who are getting ready to get out of college or getting out of high school, who are thinking about, I don't want to be locked down to the 9 to 5. I like what Amanda is doing and what Amanda is talking about. What kind of advice would you give someone like that?
It's really interesting. Someone asked me this 2 days ago, someone who was in that situation. She's, 23 and finds herself in that exact same scenario. And I told her, I was like, you have to give yourself room to experiment, especially if you're young, right? And I sometimes beat myself up because I'm like, oh, well, if I would have just figured out sooner that people were coming to me for money and business, right? I would be either making more money or I would be a lot further along than I am. And I kind of get a little hard on myself. But at the same time, I snap out of it, right?
Right.
And I realized that it's because I allowed myself that room. I mean, at 22, I didn't know my head from my own ass. Like, so I needed to experiment and try those different things. And now in retrospect, I see how all those different things actually play a role in what I'm doing now.
Right.
So when I was working in recruiting, I don't help people get jobs in Fortune 500 companies anymore, but I was working in a small business. That was my MBA.
Right.
That's what taught me how to run business.
Absolutely.
Or for example, I may not be teaching English and Spanish for Berlitz anymore, which I did for a little while. Right. But I still teach. I just teach in a different way. And that job gave me the skills I needed in order to do that. Or, I may not be marketing myself as a, life coach, but a lot of those skills still come in handy because when people are, people primarily come to me for like money stuff or running a business, like I said, in the gig economy, and all your shit's going to come up, right? And I am trained and I know how to deal with it when the shit comes up and then how to move forward from it.
Right.
That's good.
The key ingredient there.
Yeah. That's really smart. It is interesting that, a lot of people discount their life experiences because they think that they don't have an education, but life has so much to teach us as long as we're willing to learn from it. Right. And as long as we are willing to learn from it and recall those experiences and learn how to use them to improve every day.
My cat literally just fell off the table.
No worries, that's fine.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
She wanted to get it on the interview.
You want to ask the last question?
No, go ahead. That's fine.
So our last question is, how did living with your parents right after college affect your ability to become successful? And would you recommend it to others just graduating college today?
Well, I'm still living with my parents, but it's no longer because I have to. Now it's because I'm choosing to.
Nice.
It's theoretically, I could afford rent in Miami, but when you've got a market that's going up 10% in a year for rent, as a personal finance blogger, I'm like, like, I'm not doing that. Right. And also because I'm going to be traveling a lot. So this year I'm going to be, Mexico, Bali, San Diego. I'm going to be on a plane a lot this year. So it just kind of doesn't make, again, it goes back to like, does this make sense?
Right.
For the life I want to be living right now, it doesn't make sense. So I'm reinvesting in the business. But, before I got to the point where it was a choice, it was out of necessity. And it was It was probably one of the best things that could have happened. Number one, because I feel like if I did not have that support, I would have just ended up at one of those Fortune 500 company jobs and like completely given up. I know that's not the case for everyone. I'm just saying that's probably what would have happened to me.
Sure.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, because like I said, I was a recruiter. I had a database in front of me all the time. But because I was living at home and I had that net, I was like, okay, well, you've got 9 months to figure this out so you can at least pay for your health insurance, you know? So I had that net. I don't feel like me personally that because I'm very risk averse as a person, I wouldn't have done it. I would have never quit. I would have just tried to find another job. I would not be living the reality that I'm living now, right? And I'm making way more money than I did back then.
Sure.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear.
So that was number one. And then number two, on a personal level, it's really interesting when you start seeing your parents not as like God, you know, like when you were little, but, you know, relating to them as an adult. And that actually was really major for me in terms of healing my relationship with money, right? Because believe it or not, we picked up a lot of stuff, you know, probably by the time we were 7, you know, when it comes to money. You know, a lot of the stuff that we learned about money, we learned from our parents, we learned from society. So I actually was able to kind of be a witness that helped me heal my own stuff around money. Not that they ever did anything crazy or anything like that, you know, but, you know, they weren't entrepreneurs, right? They were like stable, steady jobs. And that's not what I was doing at all. So I had to kind of heal that story of you're going to be okay.
Right.
You know, be fine, you can do this on your own, and being able to kind of see it from the perspective of an adult and not a child. I think that was really major for me in terms of like actually healing that money story. So that's just like my personal experience. And you know, I'm going to be totally honest with you. I live in Miami. We have like a major housing crisis right now in terms of affordable housing. And I've got so many friends who are still living with their parents, or friends that if they were not married, they would be living with their parents. And they're cool with it because they're seeing it as, you know, this is a financial decision. That's it.
Right.
Like this is a business decision, basically. You know, and I'm not going to be stupid with my money.
Nice. That's cool. So what was the biggest thing you learned in that juxtaposition of being young and watching your parents with money and being older and watching your parents with money?
I had to get more comfortable with risk.
Sorry.
Because in running, go ahead.
I was just going to say, we had someone join the room. I just wanted to thank Greg for joining into the room.
Hi, Greg.
Yep. It's good to hear.
Hi, Greg.
Sorry. That juxtaposition. What was that?
For me, it was a lot of, you know, I learned my parents had really good financial habits. You know, my parents have like the immigrant story of, you know, they came here, both sides of the family came here with nothing, worked themselves out of it, have 2 houses in Miami. My mom had a 6-figure job. You know, they came here, they didn't even speak English. I mean, it's one of those things. So I learned some very important things from my parents as a child. I learned the amazingness of a free market because my parents fled Cuba. So there wasn't a day that I didn't go in my life without hearing how lucky I was to be American.
You've been indoctrinated into capitalism.
Basically, I've been indoctrinated into capitalism. Yes, right. Which actually, I had a conversation about that with Zena because, you know, her family, like they left the Soviet Union. It was the same thing. Like you're indoctrinated into capitalism, trying to take advantage of it. And then number 2, you know, my parents were risk averse. So they never got themselves into crazy credit card debt. My parents had enough money to pay for my college education. We never went without, you know, and they taught us some very good skills. The parts that I had to heal were the idea of, you know, working for someone else for 35 years. My mom worked for the government, you know, for 35 years, and running your own business, like the same rules don't apply.
Right.
So I had to realize that some of the rules that my parents had and that they taught me were fine. They were great. I avoided credit card debt. You know, I never did anything crazy, never had a major mistake, but they were very risk averse. So I was too, right? And in order for me to run a business, I've had to get a lot more comfortable with risk.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
That's where the reward comes from.
And reinvesting and bootstrapping and putting myself out there and realizing that there is no such thing as certainty, which was a major lesson I had to learn. And really just getting comfortable and realizing that when you're running a business, money's a little bit different. You start to see it a whole lot differently. So I basically had to go through a process of unlearning. That's what it was, is I had to go through a process of unlearning a lot of stuff.
Right.
Interesting.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, and I don't want to get political, but you said originally on the call that you were a hippie, or a moderate hippie. So how do you justify being a moderate hippie but also being indoctrinated into capitalism?
Well, I don't think making money is a bad thing, right? I think making money is fantastic. And I think that's part of what happens sometimes in the community with the hippies, right? Sometimes what ends up happening is you're like, oh, money's the root of all evil or that kind of stuff. And I'm like, no, money didn't do shit to you. Like, you know, it's money. So, realizing that money is just a tool, which, that's capitalism. Money is a tool.
Right.
And also with the intention of using it wisely. There's nothing wrong with that. You can be of service and make money. In fact, you're not going to make money unless you are being of service.
Right.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's interesting here. Dead Shepherd, Greg, who joined us, he said he's reading a book called American Mania, When Money Is Not Enough. And it's interesting because I'm just based on the title, I'm thinking about the mindset of money. And not everyone who is a hippie believes in everything being free. Not everyone who's a capitalist believes in money at all. Right, money at all costs. And, like we were talking about earlier, marrying the two together, these two ideas together, is so important that it helps balance things out. And I think that that's where a lot of people get lost, is figuring out how to balance those.
Again, it's going to those two extremes. Like, I'm a pretty staunch capitalist, but I can't figure out why a first world country hasn't figured out healthcare.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
Like or education.
Right.
There are certain things that, like, hello.
Yeah.
Like, the obvious one.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
But again, it's because people have a tendency of going to extremes. They don't have a tendency to balance and oh my God, like it's really funny. I'm a registered Republican and I got my absentee ballot and I was like, what the fuck am I doing? I have to vote, but I don't know.
Close your eyes and just pick one.
I registered as a Democrat last minute because at least I know who I would choose between the two, right? But like, right? But I wasn't gonna do that, But I was just like, oh my God. But again, I think that applies to anybody. It's like you said, just because you're a Republican doesn't mean you agree with everything they do. Just because you're a Democrat doesn't mean you agree with everything they do. Just because you're a capitalist doesn't mean you agree with like really extreme capitalists. Just because you're kind of a hippie like I am doesn't mean you agree with everything with hippies. I don't necessarily think the universe is going to repay you just because you put everything on a credit card.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's very interesting. There was on the FinCom wall yesterday, I don't know if you saw, but there was a small political debate about what Donald Trump is talking about with regard to the iPhone and how he thinks it should be, Apple should unhack it or whatever, or hack it or whatever, break it open. And people were attesting to whether they were Democrat or Republican, but it was a very amicable discussion. And people came to an agreement within, like, I think 12 or 13 different comments. We all agree on this. Okay, we're done. I'm like, you would never see that in the media, that Democrats and Republicans, and even one person labeled herself as a complete batshit crazy liberal. But she's like, I agree with everything you're saying.
At the end of the day, like, we all know what needs to get done. It's just a matter of how we're going to get it done. And I think that's what there's a lot of disagreement. And then of course, you have the media blowing this like to a whole other thing. I mean, it's just a complete circus. Like, I've been watching the debates because literally I don't know who the hell I'm voting for. Right?
We can't watch the debates anymore.
I'm like, oh my God, right? But I can't not vote. You know what I mean? So and I'm very well aware of that. You know, again, because my family fled Cuba, and I know what it's like when people can't vote.
Right, exactly.
So I'm very well aware that that's extremely important. And I'm watching all I'm like, this is a circus. Like, this is insane on both sides.
It's
right. It's
right. It
like,
is.
like the whole thing is just crazy.
Right. It would be comical if it wasn't so scary.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, we laugh because we're so uncomfortable.
Exactly. Yeah.
But what we're talking about right now, wouldn't you say that's part of the reason why there's such an attraction towards personal finance bloggers? Because we're real people and we're not speaking from the polar ends of a spectrum. We're able, people can identify with us a little bit better, and we're telling real, honest stories, and it's just more identifiable.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm a staunch capitalist. That doesn't mean I agree with what all these finance companies have done, right? Absolutely not. And I think we can all agree on that. I think someone should have gone to jail, right?
Yes.
And I think we can all agree on that as well, right?
Very curious.
That's nice. Greg just said he can't believe why this blab isn't blowing up with hundreds of people. So. Well,
it will,
we appreciate the comments,
Thank
Greg.
you. And I remember I was at this event a couple nights ago, and it was by a big corporate company that they're doing some really good things. And I got to meet a CEO who's like one of the only 20 female CEOs of a Fortune 500 company in the US right now. It was phenomenal. Nice. And I was sitting next to some people, and they did some marketing, and they focused on helping companies market to millennials. And they looked at me and they're like, okay, well, we work with a couple of really big banks, and they just can't reach the millennials. They're like hitting their head against the wall. They cannot figure it out. And I looked at her and I said, it's because we don't trust you.
Right.
Nice.
That's exactly what it is. We don't trust you. And with very good reason.
Yeah. Right.
Now, that doesn't mean, right, that there isn't a responsibility on the part of the person, right? It's up to me to figure out how this stuff works, right? So that I don't get taken for a fool when someone is trying to take me for a fool. For example, yesterday, this is actually a really good example of this. I had an interest fee removed from my mother's credit card yesterday. I fought with customer service on her behalf.
Nice.
She was there on speaker because she could not figure out for the life of her why she had been charged interest twice. And I went through it and I crunched all the numbers, and long story short, like, she accidentally paid a bill late, which she learned her lesson, auto pay from now on, right? But she accidentally paid a bill late, right? And she not only paid the entire balance, she even threw in extra money. But like, she basically closed out the whole thing. Yeah. But then suddenly she gets another statement and there's more interest charges on it. Right. So I was like, oh, that's really weird. There's something very strange going on here. I crunched all the numbers. I'm like, you have to call them, put me on the phone. Right. So after about 15 minutes of me just questioning it, right, I started to figure out that instead of applying the extra money toward the original balance, which is what they were charging interest on, right, they applied it to the new charges.
The fees.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. They charge you on
so that they could continue charging interest on the balance that they were originally charging interest on. And I didn't get to it on the phone with the customer service rep, but I was like, this has been illegal since 2009 with the Card Act, right? But basically, I think the customer service act representative started realizing that I was figuring it out, right? And I just kept questioning and questioning and questioning it. And as soon as I said, well, I don't know, because I added up all the numbers and this still is not making any sense, and that's when she was like, oh, okay, I'll get rid of the fee. I'll get rid of the fee. You know, like,
don't think about it.
Right, exactly.
You know, so at the same time, like, yes, there are people doing some really screwed up stuff, you know, that we're not okay with. But at the same time, it's up to us to actually question it when it's happening. That's our responsibility. Right. Government's not going to fix that.
No. Right. No, clearly. Exactly. That's a really good example and poignant.
All right, so we're getting close to wrapping up here, but we do have a couple of rapid fire questions, things that we like to add at the end. Yeah, Greg just commented there. Yeah, you just dropped a bomb. Yeah, that's basically what it is. Well, and you know, that bomb is knowledge. You know, and I think that's why so many of us as personal finance, and I say experts, but not all the time are we experts. But that's what really that bomb can be, is when you educate yourself. And we get so passionate about helping people educate themselves. I'm not an expert about taxes. There's an expert about taxes out there. Go find that. But we all have little pieces of, we're sharing little pieces of knowledge. We want to provide that knowledge so that you become an informed consumer. You're not taking your information from the company who's actually trying to swindle you. Right. You're taking your information from the people who have experienced that, or the people who are trying to protect you from it. Yeah, and that's really, I think that's the reason why so many personal finance bloggers and experts are becoming so prolific. It's because people, like you said, are starting to trust us or trust them more than they are maybe themselves, or definitely more than what these corporations are trying to do. Yeah. Doesn't necessarily mean that, like we said earlier, that all of these corporations are evil and they're all out to get us. But being a more informed customer is what's going to allow you to not have an accident, whether it is an accident or intentional, have that happen to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And another part is my mother was explaining to me how like she had fraud on that account, and they gave her like, it was this really weird thing, right, that happened with the credit card company and the account. And my mother could not figure it out to save her life. And they were giving her this run around. My mother got to the point where she was scared, right, to actually call and dispute these charges that she did not understand, because she was like, they're just going to give me some wraparound that I'm not going to understand. And I'm like, well, that's because that's what they're trained to do. Put me on the phone, right? You know, put me on the phone, right? And again, actually, it's really funny because I used to have to do that all the time for my old boss when I worked in recruiting. Like, he taught me how to dispute everything.
Nice. See, it all adds up and adds value later on down the road.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's jump to these rapid fire questions. These are kind of off topic, just some fun questions about you. So first of all, tell us, I mean, we know you live in Miami. What's your favorite thing about living in Miami?
The fact that I can walk outside the door and I can say, I feel like eating food from this country today, and I can find it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's definitely very good.
Yeah, that's a great.
The weather's pretty great too. I mean, I gotta lie, like we don't have that crazy, like, 12 inches of snow. Like I saw pictures of people up north, and like how I was like, how do they get out of their houses? Like I really couldn't figure it out. Like how do you get out?
Right.
And some people were trapped.
Yeah, John's parents, when the snow hit, what was that, a couple of weeks ago? I mean, they said there's like 3.5 feet when they opened up the door. It's just kind of crazy. I
was like, how do you get out? Do you like shovel your, like, I don't know.
Eventually,
I've never been.
Well, hopefully you put the shovel inside. Right.
All right. Our next question. Will you be at FinCon 2016 in San Diego? And I think you said.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Good. We get to hang out with you again then. That's going to be awesome. Yeah.
That was more for our own personal information. Yes, Les?
Yeah. And then the last question here is, what's your favorite financial tool that you are using and you encourage other people to use right now?
Oh, my God. I've got so many that I use. Mostly because I have to write reviews on them. But I'm loving Digit right now. I mean, literally just like automatic, painless saving. Painless, completely painless. Like within 2 months, I had like $400 of spare change, basically, sitting in a savings account. Acorns is really awesome too, because you can actually like invest the money into Vanguard funds. So it's basically rounding up your spare change and you're investing it into Vanguard funds. Brilliant, right?
That's cool.
Yeah, Betterment is awesome. I actually have a review of them going up in a little bit on the blog, that I basically moved all my investments over because I was like, oh my gosh, this is perfect for like a young investor. Perhaps you don't have a whole bunch of assets yet, so you can't like afford a financial planner, or they just won't work with you. Right. They make money off of you, or which is changing, but it still exists. And I don't, like, if I have an extra $20 at the end of the month, I can throw it in there and it's still going to get invested. I don't have to wait until I have $3 or $5 grand to like put money in a Vanguard ETF. Right. So that's really great. Let me see. A lot of people have been asking me about like student loan refinance and stuff. SoFi is awesome. There are a bunch of other ones. Yeah. Lend EDU is great because you can compare like 12 alternative lenders for student loan refinancing, and then I'm also a really big fan of the zero sum budget. For some reason, I have found that this works really well for me because I have variable income. And I mean, there are certain things that I still have to do by percentages, right? So I try not to spend, I mean, it depends on the month, but like on average, I'm only around like 35, 40% that goes back into the business, right? Some months are higher than others and all that kind of stuff. But on average, 35, 40%, and I know exactly how much I have to be putting away for taxes, for estimated taxes. And that's also a percentage, right? After that, right, I use the zero sum budget, which basically I give every dollar a purpose. So I know what my expenses are, right? I know what is very important to me. And to me, what's most important with money is freedom, right? That's the only reason I do anything I do, right? Is basically because I want to have that freedom.
Right.
So being able to get on a plane March 2nd and go visit a friend of mine in Mexico, and I have like 3 days in Cancun in between like seeing her and coming back, right? I can pay for the all-inclusive and not have to worry about it because the zero-sum budget helped me throw all that money into the travel account, right? So basically, whatever extra money, I basically pretend I have no money. I have a zero sum because everything's given a purpose. Or if I ever, God forbid, have an emergency, I have thousands of dollars in an emergency fund that I've been able to build very quickly because of the zero-sum budget. Anything extra after that, pretty much gets thrown into betterment so I can hopefully max out my IRA by the end of the year. But doing it in big chunks like that and just basically pretending like I have a zero sum at the end of the month helps me avoid, the money just sitting in my checking account and then me feeling like I can spend it because it's there.
Right. Nice. Then you have more month left at the end of your paycheck.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have more month left at the end of my paycheck. So I know some people with variable income use percentages. I did that for a really long time. But then when I started making more money, I was like, it just makes more sense to me. And it's a lot simpler for me to just like do these big chunks and give everything a purpose, basically.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I like that. That's cool.
Is it Greg or Debt Shepherd made this comment here? Dollars are your employees. Give them a job, And that's so true. And I think that's one of the reasons why so many people don't understand this concept of how the average person can become wealthy. They get stuck in this mindset of I'm here. I don't ever think I'll be able to get there, because they don't ever think about anything other than the money that they have being used for the things that they want.
Right.
But as soon as you say the thing that I want is to have my money working for me rather than me working for my money, then you start to have that intention of focusing on something different. And whether it's putting $5 a month to work or $5,000 a month to work, eventually that money working for you starts to be able to pay for the things that you want.
Or a really cool thing I was actually able to do the other day is, for me, my Digit account, because I'm actually pretty good at saving, my Digit account for me is like, you do whatever you want with this money, right?
Nice.
Like it's yours for whatever you want with, and you don't have to feel guilty about it, which still sometimes do, but that's something I'm working on. Right. But for example, the other day, because I had so much money in that Digit account, one of the things that I want to do is I want to be able to, give more money to causes that I actually care about, and I haven't necessarily found like one organization that like I'm so obsessed with them that like that's who I want to give money to. Right. But, I unfortunately had a neighbor in December who very tragically, he was 14 and he took his own life. And it affected the whole neighborhood basically. And, then I thought, what am I going to use it? I was looking at my Digit account and I was like, what am I going to use this money for? Right. And everything I would come up with logically, right, just didn't feel right, which is, bringing that whole intuition factor into it. So I was like, oh, I could throw it into my IRA. I was like, no, that doesn't feel right. Right. I know that's what I should do. Right. But it doesn't feel right. Oh, you could put it toward the travel fund because you're going to be traveling this year. And I was like, that also doesn't feel right because like Mexico and Bali already covered with the money I have there, and I've got plenty of time and income coming in to like beef that up. Right. Before I fly out for FinCon and stuff. Oh, you could put it toward emergencies, and I'm here like, when was the last time you actually had an emergency? Like you actually have like a significant amount of money in that account. You're good, right? You're good right now. And then I thought, oh, why don't I give it away? right? And that's when the intuition came in and said, ding, 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 ding,
You feel
right?
good.
Right. And I was like, yes, I'm going to give it away. And then I thought, who am I going to give it to? Right. And then, you know, I went on Facebook and I asked and I said, I thought of the boy down the street and I was like, oh, I want to give it to like a suicide prevention organization, right? You know, in memory of, you know, my neighbor.
Sure.
And I went on Facebook and I said, look, I know some of my friends have dealt with this in their own lives. I want to make a donation to a suicide prevention charity in honor of my neighbor, which some of you know, tragically took his own life at the age of 14. Are there any organizations that you would personally recommend? Right. And I had a bunch of different people comment and say, yes, you know, I went through it. Here's the organization, you know, or I had to deal with this. Here's the organization. And I had one, Kelly Whalen, who said, I'm actually doing a walk, right, for this very thing. You know, if you want me to, I'll send you my donor page, you know, and I said, do it. And I immediately like sent over $250, you know, and I'm like, which according to them, like will help them train politicians and teachers and federal and state employees to like know when these things are going on, you know, and I was like, that's what that money was supposed to be used for.
Right.
Nice.
Very good.
That's cool. I like that story.
Yeah.
Really good story. Well, we have to say we are so happy that you agreed to be a Money Master this month. It was awesome to have you, and we're so happy to know you. And we can't wait to see you in FinCon in San Diego. It's going to be a lot of fun.
I can't hang out with you either.
Yes, it'll be a good time. We also want to let our watchers who watch the recording and are watching now know that next month is Jay Money. He will be our Money Master. Jay Money has Budgets Are Sexy, Rockstar Finance, and he and Paula Pant right now are having one of the most successful podcasts called the Money Podcast, ironically.
Which I'm listening to religiously.
Yeah, I hear it's pretty good. So
I listen to religiously.
yeah, we're addicted to fart news right now. I go in fits and starts. Like I listen to one person for like a long period of time, and then then I got to migrate to somebody else. And Paula's and Jay's is the next podcast I'm going to add to my list. So don't forget to look out for that. That starts early next month, March. We're in March already. Wow. And so thank you everybody for watching. Yeah. It was good having you, and thank you for participating.
Yep.
Thanks for having me. Thank you, people watching.
Yeah, definitely. Amanda, stick around for a minute. We'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks all. Bye.
Okay. So